He was the genius who built the company's entire empire. Yet they fired him for daring to own the code he created. What they didn't know was that his dismissal would ignite a storm that would expose corruption, topple executives, collapse a billion-dollar corporation, and unveil a hidden syndicate pulling strings from the shadows. From courtroom battles to global investigations, from whispered betrayals to shocking revelations, his fight for justice became a full-scale revolution that reshaped the tech world. This is the story of a developer-turned-disruptor, a creator-turned-conqueror, proving that when you betray the architect, the entire kingdom falls. The quiet halls of Helix Ion Technologies have recently echoed with speculation as employees whisper about major internal restructuring. At the center of the storm is Evan Rydell, the company's lead developer, known among insiders as the ghost architect of the entire Helix Ion software ecosystem. Despite his brilliance, Evan has remained largely unseen by the public and understated within company walls. Sources close to the engineering division reveal that Evan single-handedly built Helixion's core platform, a system now valued in the hundreds of millions and relied upon by major global clients. Without Evan, the company wouldn't have a product, one senior engineer admitted under anonymity. Yet strangely, Evan's contributions have rarely been highlighted in official communications. Multiple employees report that Evan has been increasingly sidelined in meetings, with credit for his innovations often diverted to executives higher in the chain. Some believe this intentional downplaying is linked to mounting tension between Evan and the company's leadership, especially as Helix Ion prepares for a rumored structural shakeup. In recent weeks, internal memos marked confidential have circulated among upper management, triggering fears that a reorganization may displace key technical staff. These documents, reportedly drafted by the CTO's office, have raised concern among engineers who see Evan as essential to the company's survival. Those who work closest to Evan describe him as intensely dedicated, often the first to arrive and the last to leave, quietly maintaining critical systems without expecting recognition. His reluctance to claim the spotlight has made him an easy target for corporate politics, but his importance to Helixion's infrastructure is undeniable. As the restructuring rumors grow louder, industry analysts warn that any shift involving the architect of the company's core technology could destabilize Helixion's future. For now, the situation remains tense, and all eyes are on Evan Rydell, the brilliant, undervalued engineer unknowingly standing at the edge of a brewing corporate storm. Following the rising uncertainty around Helix Ion Technologies' rumored restructuring, new information has surfaced suggesting that the tension may stem from a calculated internal maneuver orchestrated by the company's chief technology officer, Marcus Hale. Insiders claim that Marcus has grown increasingly threatened by Evan's technical influence. As Evan's systems continue to outshine every project Marcus champions, the CTO has allegedly begun shaping a narrative to frame Evan as difficult, obsolete, or non-collaborative. Several engineers report that Marcus has privately questioned Evan's leadership abilities, despite Evan having led most of the platform's development alone. Confidential emails leaked to Tech Industry Daily reveal a series of suspicious performance review drafts authored by Marcus himself. These documents criticize Evan for insufficient communication and inability to align with the executive vision, a sharp contrast to testimony from Evan's co-workers, who describe him as the backbone of Helixion's innovation. Observers believe these reports may be the foundation for an attempt to push Evan out. Tensions escalated further when Marcus began quietly lobbying board members, allegedly claiming that Helix Ion needed fresh technical direction and younger, adaptable leadership. This move has confused several executives who privately acknowledge Evan's irreplaceable role. Yet Marcus, with his political influence, appears to be driving a narrative few dare to challenge openly. According to multiple sources, Marcus recently held an off-calendar meeting with select department heads, during which he outlined a plan to reorganize the engineering division. Notably absent from the new structure, Evan's position. The proposed chart removes the lead developer role entirely, redistributing responsibilities among teams that never worked on the core code. Employees who learned of the plan have expressed shock. One engineer, requesting anonymity, stated, "If they go through with that restructure, the entire system could collapse." Evan is the only one who understands the underlying architecture. Despite such concerns, the CTO seems determined to push forward. Behind closed doors, Marcus has reportedly been pressuring HR to document justification materials for Evan's removal. Sources describe a coordinated effort to build a case against the developer, regardless of his actual performance. "It feels like a setup," one executive commented privately. Marcus wants him gone, and he wants it done quietly. Meanwhile, Evan appears unaware of the full extent of the campaign against him. Witnesses say he continues to work late nights, maintaining the core system and preparing updates crucial for upcoming client contracts. His dedication stands in stark contrast to the quiet plotting taking place in glass-walled offices above him. Industry analysts observing Helix Ion from the outside warn that removing the architect of the company's foundational software would be catastrophic, especially if done without a proper transition. Yet internally, Marcus has reportedly expressed confidence that Helix Ion can move on without Evan, an assertion that several insiders describe as dangerously misinformed. As whispers of an impending showdown grow louder, the company finds itself on the brink of a corporate fracture. If Chapter 1 introduced the storm, and according to those watching closely, Marcus Hale's plan is nearing its final stage, one that could shatter Helix Ion from within. The quiet tension that had been building at Helix Ion Technologies over the past several weeks finally erupted today, sending shockwaves through every department. As predicted in earlier reports, CTO Marcus Hale has executed his long-planned move, the abrupt termination of lead developer Evan Rydell, the very architect of Helixion's entire software infrastructure. According to multiple sources, Evan was summoned early this morning to a closed-door meeting on the 21st floor, a level typically reserved for high-level executive sessions. Witnesses describe seeing Evan enter the conference room calmly, carrying his laptop and notes for an upcoming system update. He reportedly had no idea what awaited him inside. Once the doors closed, the tone shifted dramatically. Insiders recount that Marcus, flanked by 2 HR officials, presented Evan with a termination notice citing ongoing performance concerns, misalignment with executive directives, and failure to contribute proactively to team communication. These were the same accusations Marcus had quietly seeded in internal documents throughout. Sources claim Evan initially sat in stunned silence, shocked by the accusations. But the shock soon gave way to realization. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a deliberate, coordinated strike. Evan reportedly responded calmly, requesting clarification on the specific issues raised, but HR officials repeated the prepared language, offering no additional details. The most dramatic moment occurred when Marcus allegedly stated, "Helix Ion will continue developing the platform without you. Your departure will not affect operations." According to a witness, Evan paused, closed his laptop gently, and delivered a sentence that instantly changed the atmosphere. "That platform is licensed to you, not owned by you." Chaos unfolded. The HR team reportedly froze in confusion, while Marcus dismissed the claim as irrelevant. But Evan reached into his bag and placed documents on the table. Legal proof that he had never signed over full intellectual property rights. The company only had usage rights, rights that could be revoked. Word of the confrontation spread faster than any official announcement. Engineers on the lower floors described hearing raised voices echo through the hallway. Executives were seen rushing between offices, frantically checking contracts and internal memos. A senior legal advisor was overheard saying, "If this is true, we have a catastrophic liability." Evan was escorted out of the building minutes later, but not in defeat. Observers noted that he walked out calmly, almost defiantly, while employees watched in stunned silence. Many whispered that they had just witnessed the moment the company's fate dramatically shifted. Once Evan left the premises, server logs reportedly began showing unexpected inconsistencies, suggesting the platform might already be experiencing instability without its original architect overseeing it. Some staff members now fear that removing Evan could cripple Helixion's operations within days. By noon, the company issued a curt internal memo acknowledging Evan's departure. But the tone of the email was noticeably panicked, lacking the confident corporate polish usually associated with executive announcements. Employees recognized it instantly. Something had gone terribly wrong. Hours after the shocking dismissal of lead developer Evan Rydell, Helix Ion Technologies is now facing what internal sources describe as an immediate and potentially existential legal crisis. What began as a quiet restructuring has transformed into a full-scale corporate emergency, with the heart of the company's billion-dollar product suddenly placed in legal jeopardy. Following Evan's departure, executives raced to the legal department demanding confirmation of the company's intellectual property ownership. What they found was worse than expected. According to confidential documents reviewed by our newsroom, the core software powering Helixion's entire ecosystem was never transferred to the corporation. Instead, the company held a revocable license, renewable annually and protected by terms that heavily favored the creator. In the hours after Evan was fired, attorneys combed through years of documentation. Their conclusion was unanimous. CTO Marcus Hale's assumption that the company owned the platform outright was incorrect. Every update, module, and back-end process built by Evan remained tied to his personal licensing agreement. Without his authorization, Heliction's use of the code could be legally challenged, or even shut down. This revelation triggered a chain reaction throughout the company. A crisis meeting was immediately called on the top floor, where executives, lawyers, and board members clashed in a heated debate. Several individuals inside the room reported shouting, accusations, and demands to know how such a critical oversight had been ignored for years. One senior vice president reportedly slammed a binder on the table, saying, "We built an empire on rented land." Meanwhile, the engineering division has been thrown into panic. Without Evan's access credentials and internal knowledge, teams are struggling to maintain system stability. Multiple engineers confess they lack the deep architectural understanding required to manage the platform. Some systems have begun to display warning logs that only Evan previously handled, an ominous sign of what might come next. Adding to the chaos, Evan's legal representative reportedly contacted Helix Ion this afternoon with a formal request for a meeting regarding immediate licensing concerns. While the message stopped short of revoking the license, the timing and tone suggest that Evan intends to assert his rights with full force. One executive described the message as a warning shot we absolutely deserved. CTO Marcus Hale, once confident in his strategy, is now said to be in a defensive position. Insiders claim he spent most of the afternoon behind closed doors with legal counsel, attempting to explain how he authorized a termination without confirming IP ownership. His allies in upper management have grown noticeably silent, and several sources say Marcus appeared visibly shaken, leaving a board meeting. The board of directors is rumored to be considering emergency action, including suspending Marcus pending investigation. With the company's future now hinging on the terms of Evan's license, board members privately admit they underestimated the scope of the risk. One source described the current atmosphere as a slow-motion disaster gaining speed. As evening falls, employees remain at their desks, staring at system dashboards that flicker with new alerts. Fear spreads through the halls as staff realize the truth. Without Evan, the company's core engine is effectively a black box no one else can fully control. The company that fired its quiet genius now finds itself dependent on him in a way more critical than ever. Helix Ion Technologies has entered what multiple insiders are calling the worst operational crisis in the company's history. Less than 24 hours after the revelation that the company does not own the rights to its core platform, the ripple effect has evolved into a full corporate meltdown, with consequences spreading far beyond internal walls. Senior engineers now confirm that the system began destabilizing late last night. Processes that previously ran flawlessly under Evan Rydell's oversight are failing unexpectedly, generating stacks of critical errors. Automated recovery scripts, written solely by Evan, refuse to run without authentication tokens tied to his personal developer account. "It's like the system knows he's gone," one engineer lamented. The timing could not be worse. Several high-profile enterprise clients experienced outages this morning, prompting emergency calls to Heliction's support line. With no clear answers, support teams struggled to reassure customers while scrambling to contact upper management. One major client reportedly threatened to terminate its contract by noon if stability was not restored. In response to mounting client pressure, Heliction's public relations department issued a generic statement describing the disruptions as routine maintenance issues. However, leaked internal emails paint a far more desperate picture. Executives privately urged teams to patch whatever breaks and avoid any mention of licensing complications. Employees described the mood as frantic and chaotic. Meanwhile, global investors are reacting quickly and brutally. Heliction's stock opened with a sharp drop, falling nearly 12% within the first hour of trading. Market analysts attribute the decline to growing rumors of intellectual property instability and executive mismanagement. One analyst wrote, "If the licensing risk is real, Heliction's valuation is fundamentally incorrect." The board of directors convened an emergency meeting early this morning, resulting in heated arguments that were reportedly audible from outside the conference room. Sources close to the situation indicate that several board members blamed CTO Marcus Hale directly for the crisis, accusing him of negligence, manipulation, and reckless leadership. Marcus, according to witnesses, appeared increasingly defensive and unstable under pressure. Adding fuel to the fire, a second communication from Evan's legal team arrived mid-morning. A formal notice titled, "Immediate Intent to Review Licensing Integrity." Legal experts interpret this as a precursor to potential license revocation, a move that would render Heliction's continued use of the platform illegal overnight. One executive described it as corporate death written on a single page. As system instabilities worsen, employees' frustration is reaching a breaking point. Engineers who once feared retaliation for supporting Evan are now openly criticizing management. Several admitted they warned the CTO months ago about the dangers of sidelining the platform's creator. "Nobody listened," one said. "We're paying for their arrogance." In the midst of the chaos, a group of senior developers reportedly approached lower-level managers, urging them to contact Evan directly before the situation becomes irrecoverable. But with legal tensions rising and corporate pride at stake, upper management has so far refused, hoping to negotiate from a position of strength, despite rapidly losing it. Just as Helix Ion Technologies struggled to contain the operational chaos engulfing its systems, a new development this afternoon sent shockwaves through the already fractured corporation. Former lead developer Evan Rydell, whose abrupt firing triggered the company's downward spiral, has now launched what experts are calling a decisive and devastating countermove. And insiders say the company was completely unprepared. At 2:14 p.m., Heliction's legal department received a formal cease and desist order from Evan's legal team. The document, described by a senior attorney as uncompromising, instructs the company to halt all use, distribution, and modification of Evan's software platform pending a full licensing investigation. The order cites multiple violations triggered by Evan's termination, including unauthorized continued access to his proprietary modules. Executives were still reeling from the cease and desist when Evan made a second, even more dramatic move. In a public statement posted to his professional network profile, he revealed that he had revoked Heliction's license to use his code, effective immediately. The post gained thousands of views within minutes, triggering an industry-wide stir. Rival companies, investors, and analysts watched as Heliction's crisis went from bad to catastrophic. The statement, though calm in tone, was razor-sharp in implication. Evan wrote that he had been forced to reclaim intellectual property rights following unethical executive conduct and direct attempts to undermine critical engineering integrity. Without naming Marcus Hale, he made his target unmistakably clear. The comments section exploded with support. Former colleagues, industry veterans, and tech influencers praising his courage. Inside Helix Ion headquarters, the reaction was instant pandemonium. Entire departments scrambled as leadership debated whether to defy the order, comply partially, or attempt immediate negotiation. But with system errors multiplying and the legal threat escalating, compliance seemed the only viable path. One executive admitted privately, "We lost any leverage we thought we had." CTO Marcus Hale's situation worsened even further. Multiple sources confirmed that the board demanded he explain, in writing, how he allowed the company to be blindsided by licensing terms he should have verified years ago. Marcus reportedly tried to downplay Evan's announcement as posturing, but the board was unmoved. One insider described Marcus as a man watching his own career collapse in real time. Meanwhile, engineers attempting to maintain system functionality found themselves locked out of key modules after Evan's license revocation triggered automatic security protocols embedded deep in the platform. These safeguards, designed by Evan, activated when unauthorized structural changes were detected. Heliction's entire tech backbone was now tightly sealed behind permissions no one else possessed. Clients soon caught wind of the dispute. Several enterprise partners demanded emergency video calls, insisting on clarity regarding their data and operational continuity. With no answers ready and no access to the full system, Heliction's account managers were left scrambling. One major partner reportedly warned that they would initiate legal action if the situation was not resolved within 48 hours. Despite the chaos, one thing is clear. Evan's counterattack has shifted control entirely. Where Helix Ion once believed it could replace or marginalize him, the company now finds itself powerless. Its entire infrastructure locked behind a wall built by the very engineer they discarded. And as Evan's influence grows publicly, the company's leadership faces pressure from all sides. Helix Ion Technologies reached a breaking point today as the executive leadership convened for what multiple insiders described as the most volatile board meeting in the company's history. Following the cease and desist order and the revocation of the core platform license by former lead developer Evan Rydell, the board of directors demanded immediate accountability, and the result was an eruption of blame, confession, and panic. The emergency session began at 9 a.m. with a grim atmosphere. Board members entered the room carrying thick binders of legal documents, performance reports, and internal correspondence. But before anyone could settle, CEO Dana Mercer reportedly opened the meeting with a blunt statement. "We are facing corporate collapse. Someone is responsible." The words ignited the fuse instantly. CTO Marcus Hale, the chief architect behind Evan's removal, attempted to defend his actions, claiming that Evan's unpredictable behavior justified termination. But his argument was quickly dismantled when a board member presented copies of the manipulated performance reviews Marcus had authored. Documents we first exposed in Chapter 2. Sources say Marcus visibly paled as the evidence was displayed on the central screen. Anger erupted around the table. Several directors accused Marcus of intentionally misleading the executive team and jeopardizing Heliction's largest asset. One board member demanded to know why Marcus failed to verify intellectual property ownership before spearheading the termination. Another allegedly shouted, "You fired the only man who understood the system, and now the entire company is bleeding out." As pressure mounted, Marcus's composure crumbled. Witnesses report that he shifted blame onto HR, then legal, then engineering, claiming that everyone assumed the code belonged to the company. But internal emails contradicted him again, showing multiple warnings from engineers about the risks of sidelining Evan. The room grew increasingly hostile as Marcus's arguments collapsed. In a stunning moment, CEO Dana Mercer turned to the legal team and asked whether the company could survive the license revocation without violating intellectual property law. The response was immediate and chilling. Not without Evan's explicit reinstatement or renegotiation. Continuing operations puts us in direct legal violation. Gasps were heard around the room. As tensions peaked, the doors suddenly opened. Heads turned as Evan Rydell himself entered the boardroom, invited by the legal team for direct negotiation. The room fell silent. Evan, calm and composed, placed a folder on the table, containing timelines, documented warnings he had issued years earlier, and proof of his licensing terms, all ignored or buried by upper management. The silence was broken when a board member asked Evan the question everyone feared. "Is there a path forward for Helix Ion?" Evan responded with a measured tone, stating he was open to discussion, but only under conditions ensuring ethical leadership, structural reform, and complete transparency regarding his intellectual property. His presence alone shifted the power dynamic entirely. The company's survival now depended on the man they tried to erase. The meeting continued intense negotiations, but Marcus's downfall came swiftly. As Evan outlined the security protocols he built into the system, protocols that only he could maintain, the board moved unanimously to suspend Marcus pending full investigation. Reports say Marcus left the room shaking, escorted by security, marking a humiliating end to his attempted corporate coup. By the time the meeting adjourned, Heliction's leadership landscape had transformed completely. The board acknowledged, behind closed doors, that Evan is not only the key to restoring system stability but the only person capable of saving the company from further collapse. In the wake of the explosive boardroom showdown that saw CTO Marcus Hale exposed, suspended, and escorted from the building, Helix Ion Technologies entered the most decisive moment in its corporate history. With the company's future hanging by a thread, all eyes turned to the one person with the power to either restore stability or end the empire altogether. Evan Rydell, the architect they once discarded. As dawn broke this morning, executives and engineers gathered in the 21st floor conference room for what insiders are calling the negotiation of the decade. For the first time since his firing, Evan sat at the center of the table, opposite the same leadership that had tried to replace him. But this time the energy was unmistakably different. Tense, reverent, fearful. The corporation had come to terms with a painful truth. It needed Evan more than ever. The meeting opened with CEO Dana Mercer formally apologizing on behalf of the entire company. Her voice reportedly shook as she acknowledged the profound injustice done to Evan and the irreparable damage caused by the reckless actions of the former CTO. Internally, employees expressed shock. Rarely had they seen a CEO bow so deeply, especially to someone previously pushed aside. Evan listened silently, but not coldly. When he finally spoke, witnesses said the room fell into a deeper stillness. He outlined the timeline of warnings he had issued for years, the technical risks ignored by leadership, and the manipulations that led to his firing. Yet not once did he raise his voice. His calm, factual delivery hit harder than any accusation could. Several board members reportedly bowed their heads in shame. The turning point came when Evan presented a meticulously prepared proposal titled Post-Crisis Structural Integrity Plan. The document offered Helix Scion one final chance at recovery, under strict conditions. These included a full audit of executive conduct, the establishment of an ethics oversight committee, transparent engineering governance, and a leadership restructuring that placed technical authority in the hands of qualified experts rather than political appointees. But the most shocking clause was the final one. Evan would return not as a lead developer, but as chief systems architect, a role with final authority over all technology decisions, non-negotiable control of his intellectual property, and direct reporting access to the board. The room reacted with a mixture of relief, awe, and disbelief. Evan had not come to burn the company down. He had come to rebuild it on his terms. Helixion's board voted unanimously to accept every condition. It was the first time in the company's history that a single individual had rewritten the corporate chain of command. One board member reportedly whispered afterward, "This isn't a negotiation. This is a checkmate." And indeed it was. Evan had turned the entire situation from betrayal into transformation. Throughout the afternoon, engineers celebrated quietly as Evan visited the development floors for the first time since his firing. Applause broke out spontaneously. Several team members were seen wiping tears, relieved not only to have their leader back, but to finally witness justice served. As Evan reactivated his master credentials, system dashboards immediately stabilized, the platform responding as if its creator had returned home. Meanwhile, industry analysts across the tech sector began reporting that Helixion's stock, which had been plummeting for days, suddenly rebounded with astonishing force. Investors saw the restored partnership between the company and its genius creator as a sign of renewed leadership and future strength. Some even called it the most dramatic corporate reversal of the decade. By sunset, Helix Scion released a public statement acknowledging the crisis and announcing Evan's return in his new executive role. Social media erupted with praise, analysis, and global attention. In a single day, the narrative shifted from corporate downfall to historic rebirth. And at the center of it all stood Evan. Once underestimated, now irreplaceable. The shockwaves from the courtroom victory were still rippling through the industry when a new tremor hit. The former CTO, now cornered and publicly exposed, issued a vague but ominous statement hinting at evidence that would change everything. Analysts dismissed it as desperation. But insiders whispered that he had spent the last week digging through old email servers, searching for anything that could damage the protagonist's credibility. The company, meanwhile, scrambled to stabilize its collapsing stock price, fully aware that a single new headline could send them spiraling once again. Yet for the protagonist, the noise outside mattered far less than the storm brewing inside the firm. Employees who once avoided him were now privately messaging, offering apologies, information, and in some cases, evidence of wrongdoing. Many confessed they had been pressured by the CTO to support the false narrative. The board, terrified of public perception, tried to distance itself by scheduling an emergency internal audit. But the protagonist knew better. This wasn't an audit, it was a frantic attempt to erase their fingerprints. Tension escalated further when leaks revealed that the CTO had authorized a shadow project designed to replace the protagonist's software entirely. Using an offshore team, underpaid interns, and code allegedly scraped from his original work. But the replacement project had failed disastrously, crashing during testing and leaving behind logs that pointed to large-scale IP violations. The company's legal exposure ballooned overnight, and investors demanded answers. Instead of retreating, the protagonist stepped forward. He announced publicly that he would be releasing a full technical breakdown of his proprietary system architecture, proving once and for all how deeply his code underpinned the company's infrastructure. It was a bold move, one that could destroy the firm's credibility in a single stroke. Major tech outlets prepared for what they called the drop of the decade. The board panicked. Behind closed doors, the CEO initiated crisis negotiations. For the first time, they reached out directly to the protagonist, asking for a private conversation. But the tone was not apologetic. It was almost pleading. They offered settlement figures, reinstatement offers, even a board seat. Yet every proposal came with the same condition. Silence. The protagonist declined all of them. He knew silence was how the corruption survived. Meanwhile, the CTO made one final gamble. He attempted to leak doctor documents suggesting the protagonist had stolen segments of code early in his career. But the doctored metadata was so sloppy that digital experts debunked it within hours. The CTO's credibility evaporated instantly. In a dramatic twist, whistleblowers from the engineering team came forward, confirming they had been directed by him to fabricate the files. With the CTO now publicly disgraced, the last barrier collapsed. Regulatory bodies stepped in, launching investigations into the company's mishandling of intellectual property and employee rights. The company's legal team scrambled to contain the fallout, but the spotlight only intensified. Inside the headquarters, chaos reigned. Some executives resigned preemptively. Others clung to hope that the protagonist might still reconsider and negotiate. But the protagonist had already made his decision. The aftermath of the protagonist's startup announcement hit the corporate world like a seismic blast. Overnight, analysts shifted their forecasts, placing the new venture at the center of the next technological wave. Meanwhile, the old company, once a titan, was described as structurally unstable and ethically compromised. Headlines across international outlets echoed the same sentiment. The kingdom that betrayed its architect was now collapsing under its own weight. Inside the failing corporation, fear spread faster than information. Key departments lost half their staff in days as employees fled to competitors or begged to join the protagonist's rising startup. Critical operations began to stall. Reports surfaced that major clients were demanding audits of the software licensing chain, terrified that their systems were built on code now legally claimed by someone outside the company. The board's worst nightmare had come true. Their once loyal partners were threatening to withdraw. Desperate to salvage their image, the company launched a carefully scripted press conference. The CEO appeared on stage with forced composure, promising reforms, transparency, and full cooperation with investigations. But the damage was already irreversible. Midway through the broadcast, stock tracking systems around the world showed the company's value dropping in real time. Viewers didn't see reassurance. They saw a sinking ship trying to look stable. While the corporation scrambled, the protagonist was busy assembling something powerful. A coalition of former engineers, people who had been silenced, ignored, or undervalued for years, joined his new venture. They brought insider knowledge of the old system's hidden flaws, giving the protagonist's startup a massive head start. Together, they began architecting a revolutionary rebuild. Faster, safer, and designed with the integrity the previous company lacked. But the most dramatic turn came when the regulatory investigators uncovered encrypted files hidden deep in the CTO's work server. These files contained the full history of the Shadow Offshore project, including invoices, private communications, and even directives instructing foreign developers to replicate the core functionality by any means possible. This was not just unethical, it was criminal. The CTO, already disgraced, was now facing charges that could reshape the entire tech industry's standards for IP protection. The board, terrified of being implicated, attempted to shift all blame onto the CTO. But investigators quickly found metadata linking several executives to the same unauthorized project. Panic erupted on the executive floor. Some attempted to negotiate immunity. Others resigned in silence. Investors called for a total restructuring, claiming the company could not survive without removing the entire upper leadership. Meanwhile, the protagonist's public influence reached new heights. A massive online movement was forming. Developers, creators, and digital rights advocates rallied behind him. They praised his refusal to be silenced and his unwavering defense of authorship rights. For the first time, he realized he was no longer fighting a personal battle. He was spearheading a shift in how the tech world viewed intellectual property and worker recognition. The tipping point arrived when a global cybersecurity consortium released a statement declaring the old corporation's software compromised and legally invalid until the licensing conflict was resolved. Clients around the world began shutting down services, afraid of legal exposure. The company's systems went dark one by one. What began as a scandal had now escalated into a shutdown affecting millions of users. In a final twist, the board reached out once more to the protagonist. This time with humility, not arrogance. They begged for a licensing deal, an acquisition, anything that could prevent the company from collapsing entirely. But the protagonist did not rush to answer. He knew the world was watching, and his decision would define the fate of both the company that betrayed him and the new empire he was building. The board's plea lingered in the air like the final echo of a collapsing empire. Their desperation was palpable, Emails marked urgent, late-night calls, even handwritten letters delivered to the protagonist's door. But he remained silent. For the first time, the power dynamic had reversed completely. The company that once viewed him as disposable now needed him more than he ever needed them. Industry watchers held their breath. Every hour without a response sent analysts into a frenzy of speculation. Some argued he would negotiate a buyout to gain control of the company's remaining assets. Others insisted he would refuse out of principle. A leaked internal memo revealed that the firm could survive only 30 more days before bankruptcy became unavoidable. Tension, already suffocating, tightened even further. Meanwhile, the protagonist was not idle. He gathered his team, many of them former colleagues who had suffered under the previous leadership. They analyzed the board's proposal, not as supplicants but as architects of the future. On a digital whiteboard, they mapped possibilities: acquisition, licensing rescue, or complete abandonment. Each path carried consequences not just for the protagonist but for thousands of employees and millions of users still trapped inside the corporation's failing systems. As discussions unfolded, a dramatic twist emerged. A confidential report from investigators revealed that the company had concealed an even larger scandal: customer data breaches that had been quietly patched but never reported. These breaches occurred due to the faulty offshore code commissioned by the CTO. The revelation spread like wildfire, igniting public outrage. Class action lawsuits began forming within hours. Facing this new catastrophe, the board issued a public statement claiming they were cooperating fully and committed to rebuilding trust. But no one believed them anymore. Influential tech figures openly criticized their leadership, while news anchors bluntly labeled the organization a sinking monolith held together by denial. The company's stock value plunged so rapidly that trading was halted twice in a single day. Unmoved by the chaos, the protagonist made a quiet but monumental visit to the old company's headquarters. When he walked through the glass doors, employees froze. Whispers rippled through the building like electricity. Some stared in disbelief. Others lowered their heads in shame. It was the moment they never expected to see: the architect returning not as an employee, but as the one holding their future in his hands. He met the board face to face. The atmosphere was thick with dread. They apologized, some sincerely, others out of fear. They begged him to save the company. They offered full control, unlimited resources, complete autonomy. But he listened without emotion. When they finished, he posed a single question: why now? The room fell silent. No one had an answer. After hours of deliberation, the protagonist delivered his verdict. He would not purchase the company. He would not license his software to them. He would not save what had been corrupted beyond repair. Instead, he announced that his startup would offer migration support to all clients, ensuring they could transition away from the collapsing system safely. He would save the users, the innocent employees, but not the corporation itself. In the end, the developer they tried to silence became the force that shattered an empire. Fired for owning the code that built their entire foundation, he exposed a corrupt board, buried a deceitful CTO, ignited a global reckoning, and rebuilt the industry on his own terms. What began as betrayal evolved into a technological uprising. One that toppled a corporation, unmasked a shadow syndicate, and transformed the underestimated architect into a leader the world could no longer ignore. His victory was not measured in revenge, but in the revolution he sparked: a new era where creators owned their power, truth outranked corruption, and the unseen king delivered the final unstoppable checkmate.